into like a pit. It was like clay, or he got stuck. Yeah. He fell into a chemar, and he was saved. Right. And when the people saw that he was saved, when Avram Avinu came over and like looked at him and checked on him, so he was saved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then, Lemafreya, retroactively, they believed that Hashem had also saved him from the Chibshan Ha'esh. Right? Ad kan lashona. So that's what the Medrash says. But as nitgadel kivod kisei u'malchus shamayim ba'olam, and therefore, because the people's belief increased in Avram and in Hashem, so therefore the kisei malchusecha, the kisei Elohim olam vayed, shevin mishor shevin malchusecha, right? His glory was increased in the world. And even though he showed chesed to the king of Sodom, Amar kisacha Elohim lashon din. He didn't say kisacha Hashem. He said kisacha Elohim, right? Which is a lashon din, right? We were familiar, right? Like Hashem is lashon chesed, Elohim is lashon din. So why did he use lashon din in this case? Mishum she'af al pi shehitzilu min hachemar, because even though he saved him from the chemar, lo haya ritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu sheyeh od melech. He didn't want him to go on being a king. What's the proof that we have for this? Because I'm reading a very, very interesting Gemara in Nedarim that talks about what are the reasons that Avram Avinu was punished that his descendants should go down into Egypt. And one of the reasons it's brought by the Amoraim is shene'enash Avram al she'achzir lo anefashos. It's because he gave the rechushim back to the Melech Sodom. Right? The Melech Sodom said, "You keep all of the money, all the stuff, and you just give me back my people so that I can keep on being a king." And Avram Avinu said, "I'm not going to keep the possessions. You just keep everything." But what he should have said was, "I'm going to keep the people in order that I could be megayer more people." And because he didn't say that, so then he was punished that his descendants would go down into Egypt and be slaves. Right? But we see from this, from the fact that he was punished, that Hashem didn't want the Melech Sodom to have people. And if a Melech doesn't have people, he's not a Melech anymore. Ahavta tzedek v'tisna resha. This is the next pasuk. Ahavta tzedek v'tisna resha al kain mishachecha Elohim Elohecha shemen sasan mechaberecha. I loved righteousness and I hated. You loved righteousness and you hated evil, and therefore you have oil. God poured oil on you of your God. Shemen sasan mechaberecha. Right. Oil of joy more than your friend. Right, it's a little bit of what that pasuk could be in English, and if anyone knows the song, right, so this is the pasuk that it's alluding to. So what is it talking about in the context of Avraham Avinu? Ahavta tzedek, who is this? The Hainu Malki tzedek, right? That afterwards Malki tzedek comes to him and he says, Baruch Avram, right? And so Ahavta tzedek, you loved Malki tzedek. How do we know we loved him? Because he gave him meiser. He gave him a tenth of everything that he had. He gave him a tenth of everything he had. Night, Ellie. We have another 15 minutes. Whoo! Okay. How do we know that he loved Malki tzedek? Because he gave him a tenth of everything that he had. Betisna resha. Right? Go. Betisna resha. And he hates evil. Who's this? Melech Sodom. He hates him. Diksiv harimasi yadi. I'm going to raise my hand. I'm not going to take even a shoestring, even anything. Right? So that's how we know. He loves tzedek, Malki tzedek, and he hates evil. That's Melech Sodom. Right? Even a shoelace, even a little something, Al kain mishachecha, right? For this reason, right? What are we talking about? Al kain mishachecha, we're talking about the kahuna, right? About the institute of the Kohen, right? Diksiv hakohen Mashiach, that the Kohen is anointed with oil. And so he received the kahuna immediately from Malki tzedek in this moment, right? That his descendants would go on to be kohanim, and depending on which opinion in the Gemara you follow, either Malki tzedek gave away the kahuna even for himself, or he gave the kahuna only for his descendants, but not for himself in that moment. But in any case, Avram Avinu received the kahuna in that moment. So that's what we're talking about when we say Al kain mishachecha. Elohim Elohecha Shemen Sasan Mechaberecha, right? You receive Shemen Sasan Mechaberecha. Who's Mechaberecha? Malki tzedek. The Hainu Sham Shenidla Mimenu Vezeu Shemen Sasan Mechaberecha Min Chaberecha Malki tzedek. More ve'ahalos. Now this is.
Why did he merit to receive it at that moment? What you say he took a vow?
I think he took a vow. It's not mashman the psukim why it is that he merited. Chazal discuss it. But I think that what Rashi says is it's not that he merited to receive it so much as that Melchizedek lost it, if I remember correctly, because he said Baruch Avram uBaruch Baruch Hashem. Right? He should have said Baruch Hashem. He should have blessed God first and then Avram, because he blessed Avram first and then God. So then he lost the kahuna and it was given over to Avram. But as for why Avram in that moment merited it, I don't specifically know. There's other questions to ask, because Rashi tells us that Melchizedek was Shem, and isn't Avram a descendant of Shem, so shouldn't he already have the kahuna? There are lots of questions you can ask on this, but I think the basic explanation is that Melchizedek made it, he made an error by blessing Avram before God, and therefore he lost the kahuna. It was given to Avram. Mor ve'ahalos, right? Myrrh and ahalos is some other kind of fragrance, right? Ketzios kol bigdotecha, right? You're gonna have very, very fragrant begadim, right? What's the English word for begadim? Garments. Very good garments. Min hechle shein minei simchucha, right? From the from the heichal of shein, mini simchucha, right? You're going to be made sameach. Have a lovely evening, Zev. Da'amrinan b'medrash ata amarta im michut. Right, so what is it that this is talking about, this particular pasuk? Because you said im michut, you said with a thread. Like if I take even a thread, so much as a thread, right? So I'm not going to take even a thread. Right, because you said you wouldn't take even a thread, so I'm going to give to your descendants the mitzvah of tzitzis. Right, in my case, it's very, very long tzitzis, but in any case, because you didn't take a thread, so then I'm going to give your descendants the mitzvah of tzitzis. Why tzitzis? Because tzitzis is done with threads. Right? Davar echer, another way you could read this, im michud ze hamishkan, right? Why would we say that the michud, instead of meriting tzitzis, we merit the mishkan? Why why does michud allude to this? Shahaya mitzuyar bitchelis ve'argaman v'tolah shani, because it was done up with chelis ve'argaman v'tolah shani, with all of these dyes and whatnot, and the same way that I believe that the implication here is the same way that you dye threads, so too the dye was done for the Mishkan. So imichud alludes to the Mishkan. I think that's the svara that's underlying here in this case. Adkan v'zeu mor be'alos katzios kol bigdosecha. Right? What's bigdosecha talking about? The hainu tzitzis, right? Because tzitzis are begadim. Diksiv bei al kanfi bigdayim v'chulei, right? Like what we say all the time, al kanfi bigdayim ba'yulachem l'tzitzis. We say every night and every morning with the Shema. V'chulei, right? So that's what we're talking about when we say moralos katzios kol bigdosecha is talking about the mitzvah of tzitzis, because Avraham Avinu raised his hand and he said, if I take so much as even a thread, right, im michut, and therefore he merited to pass on the mitzvah of tzitzis to his descendants, which would be bigdosecha, with threads. Min hechli shein. So what's this shein that he's talking about? So the Zera Shimshon expounds the first part of the pasuk according to the opinion that says that they merited tzitzis, and the second part according to the opinion that it merited mishkan. Why? Min hechli shein v'chulei hu ha-mishkan ve'achechal shahaya mitzuyer b'tolah shani. B'tolah shani, that's like shein, right? Min hechli shein, right? From the hechli, I think shein is ivory, I believe, right? From the palaces of ivory. So the same way that it was shein over in that pasuk, so too it'd be tolah shani, which was done for the Mishkan, and therefore that's how we say that when he raised his hand, he said im michut, so he merited the Mishkan. Okay, I'm going to do a quick check-in on the time here. We've got another 10 minutes left. Let's try to cover a little bit more ground, and then we're going to skip to the end.
It just occurred to me, probably a major footnote. However, it's funny how in Hollywood they know, first and foremost, I'd like to thank God, and Melchizedek wouldn't.
What's the question?
It's not a question. I'm just bewildered by the idea that someone of the Shem standing, someone who had the first yeshiva, Shem and Aved, right, wouldn't know to thank God first, and Hollywood does.
Yeah, Kal v'chomer by us, that we should be all the more careful not to make those kinds of mistakes.
I'm just surprised. I mean, is it really believable?
Sure.
Gotta be something.
People make mistakes. People make mistakes. Our great leaders were human as us.
Also, Hollywood is not Avram Avinu, so that's like the other difference. Like, who are they gonna think? Their producer?
Yes.
I'm saying their producer, but their producer is not Avram Avinu.
Mother.
And I'm saying, but Avram's huge.
Uh-huh.
Avram's huge still, so you can't, so it's like.
Okay.
Also,
so
another way you could say it is like, was it really such a big mistake, right? You blessed Abraham and you blessed Hashem. What's the big deal that you didn't bless Hashem first? But for Malchit Tzedek, huge mistake. For me, not such a big mistake because I'm no Malchit Tzedek. For Malchit Tzedek, huge mistake, right? So that's another way of looking at it. But we should never ever delude ourselves into thinking that our avos were perfect malachim. Hashem doesn't want a world of malachim. Hashem wants people who have so much that they have potential for good and they have potential for bad, and because they have potential for bad, they're actually able to choose good. Right? That's who he wants the world to be populated.
I'll qualify what I was saying. What I was saying, I agree. I mean, clearly, but that's the thing. I think that sometimes we we look at this in such a simplified, stupefied way. Because he forgot, Reuben. They saw the reality. I think those events were vastly more complicated, and we're just looking at some simplified version of it.
It's easy for us to say, right? It's like, if I'd been there, I would have blessed God first. It's like, well, who are you to say, right?
Okay. Yeah.
No. I think was that not the point? Was that not the point you were making?
You're starting to check into like selling Yosef. And all of a sudden, it's not because they were angry at him, blah, blah, blah. It's a whole thing. And Reuben says, throw him in the pit, not because it's scorpion, but wouldn't, what do you call it, stung on Leshcha. It's like a whole super deep and super complicated and very, very more profound than we ever thought possible.
Yeah.
But we'll look at it, in the kindergarten way that, in the beginning, that's, brothers were evil.
Again, this is why it's really important to have Divrei Chazal.
Right.
Because the Chamisha Chomshei Chomesh was written so it was accessible for anybody. But that's B'derech Pshat, right? And Ein Hachinami, right? It's important to have Pshuta Shal Mikra. But in order to get the real essence, the emes, the rest of the pardes, we have to delve deeper. We have to go deeper.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is what I was.
Beautiful. Let's cover a little bit more ground. Benos melachem b'yikrosecha, right? So this pasuk, let's see. Benos melachem b'yikrosecha, right? The children of kings are your dear ones. Nitzva shegali imincha, and the queens at your right, bechetem ophir, with like a beautiful gold ophir, like some kind of adornment. Yeah. So what does this mean? Sha'amru Zal, because we have a Gemara in Baba Metzia al pasuk vayas Avraham mishte gadol. When Isaac was weaned, Avraham made a big feast, right? They made a big feast. V'chuli shezimein gedolei adoru nishoteim imayim. Why did they invite the gedolei ador of that time? Because like the gedolei ador of that time were murmuring. What were they murmuring? Says the Gemara in Baba Metzia, like, this old couple that can't have kids, they go to the marketplace and they find this abandoned baby, and then they bring it home and they claim it to be their own, and then they throw a big feast that he was weaned as if to convince us that this is really their kid when we know it's impossible. So Avram and Sarah said, all right, let's prove it to you. And so they invited them all to a big feast. And their women with them, and they brought their children, they brought their babies, and they didn't bring their nursemaids, right? Like in those days, and so sometimes in our times, the mothers themselves wouldn't nurse the babies. They would have these women that would do that. Right? There'd be a nursemaid for the baby. But they didn't bring their nursemaids. Why? As if to kind of like taunt Sarah. It's like, we all know that you don't have milk because you didn't make this baby and you're very old. So like, we're not going to bring our nursemaids. You nurse our kids, right? But she proved them wrong to them. But she nursed all of them. And then they believed that Yitzchak was really Sarah's son because now she nursed all of them. And furthermore, the Gemara actually says, like, not only did she nurse all their children, but her breasts were like flowing fountains. Like she was producing so much milk, it was crazy. And so it was really, really obvious at that point that Sarah had given birth to Yitzchak. This is in the Gemara. It's in Baba Metzia. It's in the Gemara. This is Gamze Kadosh, Gamze Torah. Elachein Amar Kasav Shebao Benos Melachim. Right? They all of a sudden they held her in a new esteem, right? All of these esteemed people. This is Sarah. Sarah is the queen in this case, that they held her in great esteem. By the way, Zera Shimshon only brings this idea that then they knew that Sarah had really mothered Yitzchak, but they still murmured. They say, how do we know that Abraham is really the father? Because maybe Sarah's the mother, but Abraham's not the father. And at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle that Yitzchak's face immediately took on the appearance of Abraham Avinu.
When he was a baby.
When he was a baby. When he was a baby. And they're on it afterwards. And in those days, we also learn, I think also from that Gemara.
Later on, I remember that you're right, that because everybody was saying he was like exactly like Avram.
He looked exactly like Avram. People would confuse them. And in those days, signs of old age didn't show on the face. Signs of old age didn't show on the face. But when people started confusing Avram Avinu and Yitzchak, Avram davened to Hashem, that signs of old age would show. And at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mitaken.
If he lived to be 187, right? Why are we talking about him being an old man at 100? In other words, like at 40, half the age.
I don't think we talk about him being old at 40. Maybe we talk about him being old around 75.
No. I'm saying if you live to be 187, we live to be about 90 right now, right? I mean, Jews take care of so 90, 95. That means that he was what it is, 45, 50 today. So that's not, call me old, I'll be surprised.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
I'm not a, thanks.
I'm
so surprised right now.
It's a good question. I don't know. It's a good question.
Really old. Also, I mean, okay. So they ask a question by Sarah.
I think
because
that
she was, 90, right? And they talk about her not being able to give birth and so forth and so on. Yet, Yocheved birthed Moshe when she was 120 something, and nobody was surprised by it. And
she had already had children at that point.
Right, so they're not surprised about it. They say, okay, that was
No,
really not abnormal.
For so many years they didn't have a child, and then they have a child.
Yeah,
right. But they say she was old.
Who was older than Sarah was older?
No, Sarah.
Yes,
by Yocheved, who was way older. Nobody says that was a norm.
I say you call that also a miraculous birth, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu was already performing miracles with regards to the birds in that time, that they would happen like in a moment, right? So it's not infeasible to say that it was because it was at that time that they were under lachatz, and therefore he did miracles for them. But by Sarah Imenu, he performed the miracle at a different
time. So based on that, they say there was not the old age, which she was not. It was about her complete inability, biological inability to have children.
Right.
Just like Avram Avinu had a biological inability to have children until they were renamed, and then they were transformed, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, so there's a much deeper Torah, as you're alluding to, about Avram being a tumtum, and there's a lot going on under the surface over there. What you've opened up, it's very good questions. I don't know why we're specifically regarding. Could also be that as the merit of Bnei Yisrael increased while they were in Mitzrayim, it didn't become so uncommon to have children at that time.
They also had like 40, 60, whatever the midrash.
Right. So it's hard for me to say. I'm not sure. We're gonna go just a little bit further in the psukim. We're gonna finish up.
On your 60 children.
Right. Soon by you. Okay. Okay, and this is the pasuk that actually brought us to this in the first place, right? Pasuk Yud Aleph, Shimi bat re'ive hati azneich v'shichi yametu beit abich, right? Listen, daughter, and see, and incline your ear, and forget your people and your father's house. Zeh pasuk tamua. This is the weird pasuk that we were first referring to when we began this whole thing. Shahaya lomar hati azneich ve'achar kach shimi re'i. First, it should have said incline your ear and then listen. Once you're already listening, what do you have to tell me to incline my ear? That doesn't make any sense, right? Right? We have other psukim that do this. That they say, first incline your ear and then listen, right? Right? It's once you have hatias ozen. So then that's the thing that you're seeing, right? But first you have to incline your ear. You can't tell me to listen and then incline, right? I'm going to miss it. Right? When we had the Bein HaBezarim in this week's Parsha, Avram Avinu was 70 years old. That's Mefersh in the Psukim. The bris Bein HaBezarim was actually before Avram Avinu told him Lech Lecha, even though we have the pasuk of Lech Lecha before we have the Psukim of the bris Bein HaBezarim. Right? The Ein Muktam Muchar B'Torah. Right? There's a really clear idea that's brought down in the Gemara in Pesachim. We see, I think, very, very early on in the Perushim of the Torah, in the big Perushim, that there's no chronology in the Psukim of the Torah, that the Torah will skip forward and backwards throughout different events for different reasons. And usually the Mefarshim will try and explain why it is that the Torah is jumping forward at this point and not explaining it in chronology, and there's a reason for that. Right? But as Amar Lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ki im asher yetze mimecha v'chulei. Right, and ki im asher yetze mimecha. Right, this is the pasuk that's going on the bris bein Misarim. So right, so we have these two instances of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being with Avram, right? And even though the pasuk of Lech Lecha precedes that of the bris bein Misarim, we see that these two instances were actually not chronologically. The bris bein Misarim happened before HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Avram Lech Lecha, at least according to the Zera Shimshon. V'zeu shimi bad ve'od re'i diksiv ve'yomer habet na hashemayma v'chulei, right? By the bris bein Misarim, Hashem tells Abraham, like, go out, look in the sky, right? This will like the stars in the sky. This will be like your children. V'zeu pamachas. This is the first time, right? When we're saying shemi bat re'i, when you're saying like, go look at the stars, we're saying listen and see. V'achar kach v'hati aznech, right? And afterwards it says incline your ear. What does this mean? Incline your ear. Le'amira acheres dahainu lech lecha. Right? Incline your ear is the instance of Lech Lecha. So that which we say first is Shemi Bat Re'i, is going on chronologically, the first one, which was the bris bein Misarim, where he said your progeny will be as multiplied as the stars. And the second one is Hati Aznech, is incline your ears. When he's saying Lech Lecha, it's like, listen to me, it's time for you to go. And for that reason, that's why Rabbi Yitzchak brought us this pasuk all the way back in the beginning of the first medrash we brought. Umash and Nedrash Alav al Pasuk Lech Lecha, this whole thing about how he was looking about the Bira Delekes, right? Like we talked about way at the beginning, is because he had told him Lech Lecha afterwards. So that's why Rabbi Yitzchak brought this particular pasuk of Shemi ben Yore'i, because once Avraham Avinu was already, he understood that there was Hashem in the world, and he had a bris bein Misarim between him and Hashem, and he was telling people about the Bira Delekes. So after that, Hashem said Lech Lecha. And then it goes into this whole beautiful idea of like, why is it saying Lashon Bat and the rest of it. But I just want to quickly finish off this inyan and then we'll jump to the end. Something that Zera Shimshon doesn't say, and I didn't see in any of the other Perushim, he brings this explanation for why he brought this pasuk in the context of Avram Avinu, right? Shim'i bat re'i v'hati aznech. Is because he's saying, because of these two times that Hashem revealed himself to Abraham. Shmi bat re'i was talking about the bris bein Misarim, where he says, go look at the sky and see your progeny. It'll be as multitudes of stars. And hati aznech is Lech Lecha, is incline your ear, it's time for you to go. But I think that there's a lower hanging fruit for why this pasuk is connected to Avraham Avinu, and it's the end of the pasuk, and he doesn't bring it, right? What's the end of the pasuk? Right? Forget your people and your father's house, which is literally what we see in Lech Lecha, right? Lech Lecha me'artzcha me'ladcha u'mebeis avicha. It's right, go away from your land, your people, your land, your birthplace, and your father's house. So I think that that's a far easier way to connect the psukim. The Zera Shimshon doesn't do that. Maybe other mafarshim do, but I noticed that immediately, and I thought it was a pella that the Zera Shimshon didn't bring it. But anyhow, just a little something. Now, quickly, we're going to just finish off here. We're going to skip ahead just to the very, very last few lines of this.
What page?
This is Kuf Gimel. If you're working with the Menukad. Okay. Okay. Ve'yelich. This is the on page Kuf Gimel on the left column. This is the last three paragraphs. It starts Ve'yelich Avram. Are we all there? You got it? Great. Vayelich Avram kasher diber elav Hashem. Vayelich he told Lot. Right? So this last section here, that we're sort of just looking at the last three paragraphs, which we can work with out of context, is the Zera Shimshon expounding this pasuk of Lech Lecha according to the brachos that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Avram. And it goes into a lot of detail, and it's very beautiful and very osek b'divrei Kabbalah. And so he expounds that one of the brachas that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Avram is the bracha of Eretz Yisrael. And so we're going to see a little bit what the bracha of Eretz Yisrael is, and we're going to see how it's relevant to us, and it's the bracha that Zera Shimshon gives us mefurish in his words. V'yelech Avram kasher dibo alav Hashem v'yelech ito Lot. Right? So Avram went out like Hashem had told him, and Lot went with him. V'yadua ki Lot hu remez leyetzer hara. Right? The Zohar tells us that Lot is supposed to be like Meramez, he's the Yetzer Hara, right? He went with Avram, so Avram had a Yetzer Hara with him, right? That's what we say. However, Lo haya holech hu im Lot, rak Lot holech im o. the pasuk says "Vayelech ito Lod," right? Not that he went with Lod, but rather Lot went with him. So he was in control, right? Al derech she'amru zal tzadikim libam b'reshusam r'shayim heim b'reshus libam, like we were seeing earlier about how tzadikim when they they'll consult their hearts, they'll consult their taivas, but they're not controlled by them, right? Because they say el libam, el lev, al lev. But Rashayim say bilev because they're steeped in it. They're in control. They're being controlled by their hearts and their taivas and their desires. V'kasav asher areka, to the land that I will show you. V'lo gila lo haaretz miyad. He didn't reveal the land to him right away. Kedei shebein kach ubein kach yichmedena. Right? Because between the time that he told him to the land that I will show you, and between the time when he actually showed him the land, right? He wanted to make it dear to him, right? That when you sort of like imagine it's like, hey, I want you to meet me, at Shiur David at 2:00. It's like, oh, why? It's a surprise. Oh, it's like now you've got my interest, right? But if you were to tell me right away, it's like I bought you a book. Cool. You bought me a book, but if you tell me it's a surprise, it's like you're kind of like you're leading up to this big exciting moment where you hand me this book that I've been dreaming of for years. It's like, wow, it's like it's like the ultimate edition of the Zera Shimshon, right? This thing that you're very excited about. So that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't reveal everything at once. Lir mozlo, to hint to him, shekol b'nei Yisrael tzarik sheyachmedu osa, that all of b'nei Yisrael has to make the land of Israel, has to make Eretz Yisrael dear to them, and not reveal it immediately, right? And he said, asher areka, to the land that I will show you. He didn't have what to put into ways, right? So the land that I'll show you. So where do I go? It's like, I'm going to show you. You have to come along with me. And in that way, Avraham Avinu was like sort of excited to see what was going to happen next. So too, all of his progeny also have to be excited to see what's going to be. And we know that now we're talking about Eretz Yisrael, right? So that's a chiyuv on us, that we have to really make the land dear to us, especially in this critical Eis Tzara. We have to really be. Elsie was that we have to make this land so dear to us.
Maybe we also waited till now to go. Lech Lecha. Now go get your land.
I don't think that's what the Zera Shimshon is saying, because I hear what you're saying. I don't think that's what he's saying, because he says Lech Lecha and afterwards he says Ereka. And the time, the moment where he starts to make him excited about he starts to be like, oh wow, what are you going to show me, is with the word Asher Ereka, which I will show you, which happens after those words of Lech Lecha, not before. Right, so I don't think it's because he was waiting until that moment of Lech Lecha. Although, of course, you could say that the Bris Bein Besarim, was like this moment of oh wow, we're going to have a relationship now. And so from then until Lech Lecha, it was like, well, what's this going to be like, right? So in that way, it was made dear to him.
According to what we're going through right now, we thought we were going to go 2 weeks ago into Gaza, right? We thought we were going right away.
So you're saying
Lech Lecha. Now you go, and what are we going for? To get our land.
Yeah, Bezrat Hashem, your word should be in the schut that our leaders get their act together. And mamish, if they had just gone down Simchas Torah, it would have been like something straight out of Tanakh. It would have been so cool. Who am I to say? But Bezrat Hashem, we should be shluchim for HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all the right ways.
It's not enough that they call it flood right before Noah.
Say again.
It's not enough for us that whatever.
That they called
it their terrorist attack. Flood. And it happens right before the Parshat.
That was the name of their. The attack.
What, the Hamas called it a flood?
Yeah.
What?
Alexa flood.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's funky. I didn't know that.
Right?
I didn't know that. There's other things that's Maram is, right? Pikot Bikadati, if anyone's seen that Torah. And also Avraham Avinu was born in the year 1948, right? Look at the calendar, 1948. And when he fought against the Arba Melachim, he was 75 years old. So 75 years after 1948 is 2023, which I think is a pretty cool, nice thing. But let's quickly finish off because we're already running 11 minutes over time, and we're right at the end here, right? Every single person, every single Jew needs to see Eretz Yisrael before he will be admitted to Gan Eden. Right? Eretz Yisrael is called Shar Hashem. Tzadikim Yivovo. They're going to go through the Shar Hashem. That's Eretz Yisrael. Ve'od asher ereka shebevias hagoel kol adam yirena. when we come to the Geula, every person's going to see it, right? To the land that I will show you. He's not talking to Avram Avinu. He's talking to every one of us. To the land that I will show you in the Geula. I'm going to show you Eretz Yisrael, me myself. Kidisnan kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelik le'olam haba. And if you're going to say that all of Bnei Yisrael has a chelik in the olam haba, but we can't be admitted to Gan Eden unless we've seen Eretz Yisrael, then perforce HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to show us Eretz Yisrael because we know that we have a chelik in the olam haba. Right? Yehi ratzon sheyibim herav yominu amen. May it be speedily in our days. The Geula should come. Each and every one of us should merit to see Eretz Yisrael in all of its full glory. Right? We should seize our land back. We should take our birthright, our nachala. Oy. Amen.